Hello again, it's Miss T with our third of 4 videos for this week. They're short videos, each of them are shorter than our average 75-minute class. So this will be about 25-30 minutes like the other ones have been. And yes, you are required to take notes on it. Yes, you will use some of the information from this video to be wildly successful on test 1 that is already open and available for you in Blackboard. And yes, you will use your notes from this video to be wildly successful on some of the projects and analyses that you're going to do for your 25-point activities and your 50-point projects that are coming up within the next couple of weeks. So we're in week 4 right now, and week 5, 6, and 7 we'll have another 25-point activity like we finished recently, and you'll have your first of 2 50-point activities or projects like the syllabus indicates. So we're plugging along, and y'all are developing your foundational knowledge about introductory sociology. So hopefully you are already seeing some connections and developing a better idea about macro and micro scale connections. So today I'm going to talk to you some more about culture, which is chapter 2. But mostly today we're going to examine culture through the lens of chapter 3's topic, which is called socialization. And the content of the last 2 chapters builds on the content of chapter 1, where we learned about the sociological imagination and developing our sociological perspectives. And today, up through week 4, we are going to branch over into our course learning outcomes number 3 and 4, both of which ask you to be able to describe connections between certain things like socialization, which is what our topic is today, and interpersonal communication in daily life, which we have already spoken about some in previous lectures, and we're going to be talking about in this lecture and the one that follows this to complete chapter 3. Okay, so there are all 4 of our course learning outcomes that we've hit on already, and this is just week 4 of our class. So we're going to continue to attack those learning outcomes and try to achieve our goal before the end of the semester. And this course in particular, and today's discussion, is going to help you hone your skills toward critical analysis, critical thinking, and also cultural awareness, like the general education program has for their learning outcomes, those general education learning outcomes. Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty. You need your notebook and pencil or pen or whatever, and let's talk about socialization. So this word has a very specific meaning in sociology. We do not use this word to describe people when they're chatting and hanging out and visiting. Instead, we talk about chatting and hanging out and visiting. We don't say there's people over there socializing. We don't use the word that way. In sociology, the word socialization refers to a lifelong learning process. What is it that we're learning? Well, we're learning ways to behave. We're learning ways that we should carry ourselves physically. We're learning ways that we should carry ourselves socially or privately. We're learning ways to navigate the reality that we live in. We're learning from the people and the places and the things and the events and everything that happens around us. We learn in formal ways, and we also learn in informal ways. What you and I are doing right now is a form of formal socialization. I told you to get out your pen and pencil or your notebook or whatever and start taking notes on this, and you're going to need this to do certain activities in the future. And so this is a formal learning process that we're engaged in right now. So in the sociology sense of the word, socialization is happening when you are looking at this video and technically interacting with me, when you listen, take notes, pause it, rewind it, text me with your questions, and then use the information to complete your assignments successfully in the future. So, socialization has a specific definition to it. It's a lifelong process of social interaction through which you learn all the behaviors that you need to get by in daily life. You learn the way to carry yourself physically. You learn the condition that you are supposed to present in order to be able to get along and get through life with members of your immediate social group. So socialization is a learning process. There is a key word. It is lifelong. That learning process is lifelong. And how is it that you learn? Well, there are informal things like watching SpongeBob SquarePants. Yes, you can learn things through watching TV or watching movies or something, or just observing somebody eating lunch across the room. You can learn informally through that kind of interaction, but you can also learn formally in settings such as the one we're sharing right now, where you are supposed to concentrate on taking in information, specific, pointed information that's going to result in some change for your total person, right? So socialization is the entire topic of chapter 3. It's directly linked to chapter 2 because, as we mentioned, socialization is a lifelong process. And in chapter 2, when we talked about culture, we mentioned the fact that none of us are born with some kind of program already installed on us so that we have pieces of our culture already in place and we just build from there. That's not how it happens. We learn the way that we behave. We learn the way that we're supposed to think and feel and act. We inherit a cultural system. We inherit a social structure from previous generations. We learn what that is through the socialization process from the previous generations and also from things that we call the agents of socialization. So that's another key term from this chapter, the agents of socialization. Agents of socialization are the people, the places, the things that give you interaction opportunities. They are the things that you have life experiences with. And therefore, we learn part of the expectations for our behavior from interaction with those things and people, and from the experiences that are created through our interaction with them. So the agents of socialization are very numerous. There's a lot of different categories of things that we experience in our lives that give us opportunities for learning. Remember, learning happens informally through just conversations, chatting, and a mother telling her child, no, put that down, right? Don't do it again. Some kind of informal sanction like that if we don't follow expected norms. But also socialization happens in a formal way. And so we're going to look at different agents of socialization that are designed in society, in social structure, to participate in the fact that culture is shared and culture has to be passed from one generation to the next. Okay, so let's get a little deeper into this. So the agents of socialization. There are several, as I mentioned, but one that sociologists usually agree should be at the top of the list. And let me just tell you, sociologists have so many different points of view and attitudes about things. It's rare that you'll get, the majority of us to agree. But most of us agree that family, and let me just say that I am putting family in air quotes when I say that, because I want to emphasize here that family, which is an agent of socialization, so number 1 on your list of examples of agents of socialization, family should be at the top. And I put my air quotes around it because I want to emphasize that family is a macro scale concept. and a micro scale situation. So both. Family is a macro scale concept because the family is responsible. In our society has a norm, it has an expectation that the family, see my air quotes again, family is responsible for caring for children when they're born. The social structure could be set up a different way. We could have a situation in which, we send everybody who's born in the month of September 2019 to a particular house where every September 2019 baby lives until they're old enough to be on their own. That sounds very complicated to me and kind of impersonal. It doesn't sound like it fits the expected norms, and it shouldn't, because that's not what we do in our society. Family on the macro scale is the unit, it's the concept that our society says is the norm to take care of offspring. Okay? Some of you, when you were doing the Safe Haven Baby Box activity, responded to the norms in our society about family and families' roles in the upbringing of a child, or a mother's role in the upbringing of a child, or a father's role or lack thereof, as some of you pointed out in your commentary for the Safe Haven Baby Boxes. But family is a norm in our society about taking care of offspring, taking care of little ones until they're not little ones anymore and they can take care of themselves. So, family's responsible for a lot of learning. There's a lot of learning going on. And I don't mean the kind of learning that goes on in school. School has formal processes of learning for the most part. There's a ton of informal too. We'll get to that. But family has, for the most part, informal learning in the socialization process. Family is responsible for our foundational norms, our foundational values, our language. Language is something, if we don't have it, there's no way to share culture and communicate ideas and pass information from one generation to the next. So our family unit is the unit that's responsible for imparting that knowledge, that informal knowledge, that informal learning onto children. So it's an agent of socialization. Now notice, maybe you haven't noticed, but notice I've been very careful to not say mom and dad and sister and brother, or family words like mom and dad and sister, brother. I didn't do that because on the macro scale in sociology, we kind of we try to be value free about who makes up the family. We're not going to say that it has to be mom and dad, or it has to be a two-parent household, or it has to, we're not going to say all of these value judgments about who makes up the family. But we do know that the assumption that bloodline members or adopted members of a household are the ones who are responsible for a child's upbringing. We're just not going to say who those members of the household should be or must be. Those are value judgment words, and we're trying to work on being value free. So family is an agent of socialization. There's a ton of social interaction that happens in the family, and therefore it's number one on the list of the agents of socialization. I've got a fly flying around me. Sorry about that. Okay, so number two on the list of agents of socialization, I will go to, and you don't have to put these in any kind of order. People usually put family first, but I'm going to put school as number two on the agents of socialization because I've already mentioned it in our discussion a moment ago. So school is a place where children go to have formal education, formal learning processes. So that part of the socialization that is organized and systematic, part of that comes from schooling. However, schooling puts us in contact with way more people our own age from different family styles that have different attitudes and different ideas than probably our own family does. And so the peer groups, which is a third agent of socialization, our peer groups, the peer groups that school puts us in contact with can also cause informal socialization to happen while formal socialization is happening in the context of the purpose that we go to school. So you interact with teachers, you interact with classmates, you interact with the bus driver, you interact with et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, all of these additional people in your realm of reality than merely the people who are in your household and contribute to your upbringing in the household. So school puts us in contact with people who expose us to different ideas, potentially, than the ideas our family exposes us to. It has formal and informal processes where we learn. Anytime we engage in social interaction, anytime, we have the potential to learn. And indeed, sociologists say we do learn when we engage in social interaction. So any example that you can think of that creates a situation where you interact and you make observations of others who are interacting, you are going through the socialization process. The mass media is considered, I guess that'll be fourth on our list of agents of socialization. The mass media is considered to be an agent of socialization because even if you are alone in a room right now, or even listening to this video on a car Bluetooth or something, this is part of the mass media telecommunication process. And since you're listening to me and taking in information and concentrating on this, we are participating in the socialization process right now. It's a lifelong, continuous process that never ends. It begins at birth and it doesn't end until death. We constantly take in information to learn how to negotiate our situation in life. A 5-year-old needs a different set of knowledge and ideas and just concepts of life than a 35-year-old needs. So a 5-year-old's world has a different cultural toolkit, like you read about in chapter 2, than a 35-year-old world does. So as we go through our life course, there are different parts of knowledge that we take in and we have to use at one point in our life to the next. And some things that we learned how to do when we were 10, some things they are perfectly appropriate to still do when you're 40, other things not. For instance, if you loved riding bicycles when you're 10, you can still love riding bicycles when you're 40, and no one thinks of that as something that's not age appropriate. But there are some things that you and I have said them before just in casual conversation. We might say, that's not age appropriate, right? We expect someone to act your age. We have that little phrase in our culture. So as we go through our aging process, we have a different set of tools that we need in our cultural toolkit in order to get by for our situation in life. So all the agents of socialization create experiences for us so that we can know how to get by for our situation in life. But here's a question I want you to think about. The question is it true to say that in a person's socialization process that they learn the norms of society? Is that true? Think about this for a second. We maybe need to look at it objectively and step out of a situation. Does everyone have or share the exact same norms as the next person in the United States? Is your attitude about tattoos and my attitude about tattoos, are those things the same? Should we assume they are? Well, where did you learn yours and where did I learn mine? And what are the norms associated with that? So this is a complicated question that I asked you. Do we learn norms in society? Well, if you think back to lessons ago when we learned what norms are, there are three types. What are they? You can look back in your notes to reinforce that. The norms that we learn in society are not necessarily part of the accepted cultural practice of the entire population, but maybe norms that are specific to our subculture, like we learned about from chapter 2. So we learn the behaviors of the people that we are around every day. We learn their behaviors. If they follow socially approved of norms, then we will learn socially approved of norms. If they don't learn socially approved of norms, and they don't get sanctioned when they misbehave or don't follow socially approved of norms, they're not going to know any different. An example that comes to mind is if you happen to cuss a lot, but you don't cuss in an angry way, you just use certain impolite words just as adjectives or nouns or whatever. It's an effing beautiful day outside, for instance, if you use that word just as an adjective. And you have, a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old who's learning how to talk, what words are they going to learn? They're going to learn the words that are modeled for them every single day. And so if that child learns those kinds of words or learns, other inappropriate behaviors for broader social acceptance, they don't have a way of knowing inside themselves that it's not socially accepted outside their household. So you have a child who has learned impolite words who goes to kindergarten and uses those impolite words in front of the teacher and uses those impolite words in front of other students and doesn't know that those words are impolite because no one has ever said, don't say that. No one has ever given a negative sanction to communicate to that child, this is not appropriate or acceptable. But will the kindergarten teacher? Will the other students? Will the parents of the other students, if they hear about it, or if they hear their child say a word that they learned from that other child? So socialization happens all the time, but we don't necessarily learn the socially acceptable part of norms. If the people we are around, if the TV shows we watch, if the experiences we have don't model socially acceptable behavior. There's lots of different socially acceptable behavior. Some subcultures say one thing is perfectly fine, while another subculture says it's not. And that's where certain frictions can come up between these different subcultures within a society. So it's important to think about socialization specifically within sociology as a complicated learning process because it involves a lot of messages being transmitted back and forth. You do, of course, learn to be a member of your culture or your subculture in your socialization process, but you don't necessarily learn the dominant values or norms or ideas or rituals, etc. You don't necessarily learn exactly, socially approved of behaviors in your socialization process. You learn what is modeled for you every single day in the behaviors and the experiences that you have when you interact with others. So it's a fascinating and a complicated process. Socialization is lifelong, remember that. And so the last video that I'm going to make for you this week is going to focus on that lifelong concept. And we're going to look at whether we're going to branch into psychology a little bit and biology a little bit. Because I told you at the beginning of this lecture, and we've had this conversation before, that none of us are born with any components of our culture like programmed into us. So where do we get that knowledge, and how much of our behavior might or might not be determined by the fact that our biology is organized the way that it is, or our brains are organized the way that it is. So it's important for a sociologist, in order to be as well-rounded and have the full picture as possible, it's important for us to get out of our silo and look at other concepts like psychology and biology to try to figure out how much of this being human thing controls or affects, I need to find a better word than control, although some people might say control, how much of our behaviors, our attitudes, our conditions, how much of these things are determined by our biology or by our psychological makeup or a combination of both. So the next time you view a video, we're going to be talking about that fascinating topic. And thank you for your time. I will see you soon.